Hello and welcome. This is Social Studies, Voices from Across America. I'm Bill Wood.
And I'm Peter Goldsmith.
Peter, today, I'm looking forward to this. We're moving off the election and political beat to something much more inviting, artwork, especially the art of Barbara Fisher. Peter, you know this woman. She lives not far from you in North Carolina.
I do know Barbara Fisher, and yes, not only is she a delightful person and an important artist and a very wonderful creative thinker, but I thank her 1,000 times from taking us away from the political doldrums that we've been in for a while. As you said, Bill, I did get an opportunity to spend some time with her and did a nice little short interview with her, and she's actually a very thought-provoking, very talented artist.
I think some people are going to be amazed when they see this because questions that they've had, same questions I've had for artists. It's refreshing to hear an artist talk in such linear terms about something as abstract as art.
Yeah. Again, Bill, one of the things that drew me to Barbara was her thinking as much as her painting. I adore her paintings, and they come in all sizes. We'll talk about that later on. But what's really important is she has a poetic nature about the way she creates art. And I really like that. There's a lot of talent through the hand-brain connection with her, but she's also got a very poetic sensibility. One of the things that drew me to her, she's got a new painting. We're going to see it in the interview. It's kind of based on, or an homage, I don't know which way she'd like to term it, to Kandinsky. And Kandinsky is a wonderful painter, very often doesn't get mentioned as much as some of his colleagues, but a thinking person's painter. And Barbara picked up on that and did her Kandinsky painting, quote unquote. And I saw it and thought, I've got to go over to the studio and talk to her. Has to be.
There was a time when I collected art myself, and a gallery owner told me when I started to buy things of consequence more than posters, always buy stuff that you like. Don't buy stuff for investment because art is the perfect marketplace. It's only worth what somebody will pay for it. So if you don't like looking at it, don't bother. And she kind of addresses that in this conversation you had with her. And it was refreshing to me. That's what drew me to the conversation, the talk.
Yeah, she's pretty much no holds barred about what it takes to become an artist, quote unquote, in this case, a painter, in her case. It's years and years of thought and work and trial and error, like everything else. And one of the things that's wonderful about Barbara is she embraces the chaos that's within her work. I forget who said it, but I'm not sure, but in disorder, there's always a bit of order. And she understands that concept. And that's what a lot of her work comes from. And as you'll see in this interview, sometimes she has a great idea, has no idea where to start it or where it's going to go, and has the courage, which is an important word here, to go for it and come up with the results she has. So let's take a look at my little interview with Barbara Fisher, a painter from New Jersey, but now working and living in Asheville, North Carolina.
Barbara, tell me the first time that you really declared yourself an artist.
I think it was when I was in the Metropolitan Museum. I grew up in New Jersey, so I had access to New York. I saw Van Gogh and Gauguin and the German Expressionists, and realized that I could create a world, that it didn't have to look like anybody else's world. So in my head, I thought about that when I was pretty young, that I was going to be a painter. And then when I actually got into school and started working, I realized that although I was doing all the classes I was supposed to do and learning everything, I was so much more interested in the interior narrative than I was in anything external, that was my path, was going to be that, like creating a vocabulary of my interior narrative. So I probably really realized that in college. And before that, it was just a lot of fantasizing or recognizing other great artists.
Tell me what still excites you after many years, of making work. What still excites you?
The discovery, the finding new materials, coming back around upon things I've been on before. It's kind of like all these shapes and these marks are my friends, and I rediscover them in different mediums. And it's like, you know, they're my friends, and this is what I have to say to the world, regardless of if I know what I'm going to do ahead of time, which I don't. But being able to change mediums and not do the same thing over and over again, I'm always discovering new things, but I'm always circling back upon my years of experience. So at this point in my life, it's just, I mean, I have so much material. I have so much that whenever I start something new, you know, older things pop up, and it's just more and more integrated, myself integrated into the painting. So.
Can you be an artist without being a craftsperson?
I don't think so. I think you have to learn that first. I know you have to learn that first. You can't do, I mean, people come in and they look at this abstraction and they somehow think it's easy, which is so wrong. It's so much harder than painting figuratively. And my work used to have imagery, as you know, and I used imagery off and on for years, even though I painted a lot of abstraction. But you have to learn the craft, but there are also people who learn the craft really, really well, but honestly don't have a lot to say. And so they can paint really well, but you don't feel their voice or their experience in it. So, I mean, it can go both ways. And I feel bad for people like that, because I just want to say, you know, who are you? You're such a good painter, but there's no story.
Yeah.
You know, there's no content. Yeah, although people do like to have hints. I don't mind talking to people about, well, people will say, like, what does that shape mean? And it doesn't work that way. But I will talk to people about the process and what some of these things mean to me in terms of like energy moving around, or very vague things, but they're all like Rorschachs, and people see so many interesting things when you don't explain it to them. But I also don't want to be the kind of artist who's intimidating and won't talk about my work to people and says, you know, you just get what you get, because I think that's wrong. I think people want and weigh in. Sometimes a title is a way in. Sometimes one form in the painting, you know, I'll say, oh, I get it. That's like a cage or something, and then they'll see how the other things fit in. So I think you got to give people some help. And I also, because I'm in this situation where I have public coming in 2 days a week, you know, it's fun, it's interesting. Because, I mean, some people are very curious and they're very intimidated, and they want to like art, but they don't understand abstract art. So, you know, I feel like that's one way I give back, other than just through my art, is by helping people see that there are other ways to see things, and there is an interior world that you can depict, you know?
Yeah.
And everybody's is different, and everybody isn't interested in doing it, but for those of us who are, you know, it's how we live and why, you know, why we do what we do.
But in experimentation, there has to be failure. And I accept failure in my work, not that all my work is failure. You know what I mean? Do you feel that way about your work because it's abstract primarily?
Yeah, and I did a whole series of black on black paintings. I mean, talk about inaccessible for most people. They're some of my favorite paintings ever, and other artists love them and appreciate them, but, you know, even to try to talk to people about those was, there was no point, because they were black on black paintings and they weren't sad. You know, people want to project this meaning onto paintings that's like, are you mourning or something? It's like, no, this is, you know, in fact, I just spent a week in Utah and saw the most incredible, fabulous colors everywhere. And I came back and I immediately started painting black and white. And I didn't question that. I don't really know why, and it doesn't matter why, but everything that I absorb and take in, I mean, eventually will pop out. But there's no linear progression to that. So why I did these black and whites, I don't know, but I really love them, you know, and they made sense right then and now, and it has nothing to do, I mean, people also think that my work is always connected to what I just saw outside myself, and that's just not true. But that's what a lot of people want to understand is, you know, where does all this come from? How do you do this? what's your inspiration? Which I always tell people, because people ask that, what's your inspiration? Because they just want to start a conversation. And I say my inspiration is working, because I've been working for so long. One thing leads to another, and there's always something, at this point, my inspiration is my own work, really, and my history, and where I'm going to go from here. I'm not looking for rainbows.
So when you sit down to an empty canvas or a palette or whatever you're painting on, you don't know what's going to go there.
I don't.
Oh.
I mean, if I'm doing a series, like the series Tangled Mapping, I know that they're all going to be similar, and then I'm going to start in a similar way. Yes, in series I generally know, and then maybe I'll pick a palette or not, or I'll know certain forms that I've been working with, but I don't have at all a picture of what it's going to be. And a lot of times it'll get painted over 2 and 3 times.
And do you care what it's going to be, or are you just happy with the expression that's coming out?
Well, I care what it's going to be. I won't stop until it's right, but I try not to manipulate it to anything that's other than what it wants to be.
So you're letting it lead you down
Yeah.
the path it's going to go, and you're just going to
Right.
contribute to it.
Yeah, you kind of have to meet it halfway. I mean, that's what I'm talking about by being in that zone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it's hard to do. You got to stay open, and you have to look, and you have to, be willing to wipe something off or paint over something if it looks bad, and recognize that, and not just say, oh, I wanted that over there. I mean, sometimes I'll get stuck in one corner of a painting because I like it so much, and I'll realize that's the one thing I have to take out. You probably do that with writing too. It's like you get attached to a line, I'll get attached to a corner.
What's the process that leads you
To begin?
or to the end result, whenever the end result may come?
Well, it's starting from, I usually put a very large shapes, big colors surface on things to start. And then I take some edges or some shapes that start to come out and emphasize those and cover other things up. And I start to see patterns, and I start to see a narrative. Sometimes I'll start to see, almost like a Rube Goldberg machine, like where this is going to hit this and that's going to go like that and pop off. That's the way I see things in these paintings. So as I work, I'm kind of building a structure, even though it may not look like that to anybody else. That's what I'm seeing. And then as I go, I always get to a middle point where it's chaotic and I think it's awful. Almost always. And then I have to pull it out from the deep, which is sometimes very painful. And then I get to a point where I'm able to fine tune it, and that's the icing on the cake, finishing it, knowing that it's okay, and figuring out when it's finished. But you almost always get into that middle part where it's awful. Yeah. And sometimes people, I had a guy come in here once and said, he was kind of like defensively said, does this stuff mean anything? Like he was angry because he didn't understand it and he thought it was stupid and overpriced, but he was aggressive about it, and I had a conversation with him because I didn't want to be a jerk myself. Yeah. But it was like he was so uncomfortable because he didn't understand it, and does this stuff mean anything? And so we had a long conversation about what's meaning and what is
Yeah.
But people try to, usually a little more tactful than that, but they do want to know.
Form and color. Tell me how they interact and how they digress for you.
I think the form, in my case, the form usually dictates the color. And that's a very intuitive thing, and I'm not sure why. But somehow energetically in a painting, it'll begin to feel like it needs to be red because there's some kind of conflict going on between these two abstract forms. So it'll go toward red, but that the form, the beginning stages are always pretty much in neutral. Even though I said they're kind of big blocky colors, there's no color selection at the beginning. And as the forms interact, like maybe these two feel like they should be green because they're shaking hands, and then that'll develop into like the development of the color. Whether it's going to be more muted or more bold, whether it's going to be like sanded off and repainted and all that. But It's sometimes I'll pre-plan the palette, but usually I don't. And the black on black paintings were fascinating in that way because there were so many variations of black, and it was so fascinating. And once I got going on those, I just didn't want to stop. There's so much going on in black and white work that is so subtle, and you can really get drawn into that because it's just a whole other world. And sometimes when I'm working on a big piece in color, I'll take a photograph of it and then turn it black and white so I can see it that way, because it's, if I don't know what to do next, that'll help me because I can see the values and what needs to, where I need more emphasis. Yeah. So it's a really good tool to be able to do that on the phone. You just take the picture and then switch it to black and white and go, oh, I see.
Right. Let me just go back a little bit. So you said you're from New Jersey, born in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And lived in the Northeast for how long?
Just through high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you moved somewhere else.
I went to college, yeah.
And then came, and finally you're down here in Asheville.
Right, I lived in San Francisco for a long time.
Okay. How does the aesthetic vary for you as you get older and as you change geographical places in the world?
Changing geographical places, coming from San Francisco and then coming here 20 years ago. I mean, there was a very...
And here is Asheville.
Here is Asheville.
Right.
It was a very small number of what I considered serious artists here 20 years ago. I mean, there are lots and lots of craftspeople. And there were some really good painters, but in general, I mean, when I go to a big city, whether it's New York or San Francisco or Chicago, I kind of go into the art galleries and I go, here's some real painting. I hate to be like that, but there's so much around here that's so amateur. And there's a lot of good stuff too, but a lot of that is not, displayed as prominently as a lot of the amateur work.
When you started making paintings when you were in your late teens, early 20s, yes? Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you feel that those paintings were purer than your paintings are now? I'm not saying better or worse, because I feel that way about my writing. There was a purity there, almost a naivete and purity that allowed you to do things which today you think twice about. Is that?
Well, that happens in series, in mini bites. That phenomenon happens. That I'll start a series and I'll do a fabulous painting, and then the next one I'm self-conscious. I'm trying to do something similar, and I'm so self-conscious I can't do it, and I try too hard. So I still have that experience. Uh-huh. But when I look at the work I did when I was in college, I mean, it wasn't very good, but what I see that is consistent with who I am is that, like, my life drawings, I would be in life drawing class, and I would be drawing a figure, and all of a sudden I'd take the arm and I'd start, like, drawing trees, or, I just had to go beyond what was right in front of me, even when I was learning to draw. So, I mean, that's always been me. So, and as I said, I mean, I made a lot of really bad paintings, but I always knew what I wanted to do. I just needed the time and the skills and to develop. I mean, I tell young artists who come in, it takes years to develop your voice. You can't just expect to come out of school and have a style, and have people want to buy your work. And it's a long process. And I remember an older artist saying that to me when I was in my 20s, that it was probably going to take 10 years. And I was so angry because I thought I was good, I was 28 or whatever, and I thought, I'm really good. But, whether good or bad, it wasn't about that. It was, you wouldn't have been able to look at the work and know it was mine because I didn't have my voice. I hadn't developed it yet. So, there's always more to learn. I mean, and I know my work has gotten better, and I know it's gotten more, I'm more fluent. I'm just more fluent with my own painting than I ever have been, and so I don't have as many times when I'm, saying, "Oh, this is terrible." I'm more. I mean, I still have that middle stage I have to work out of, but I'm pretty confident that it's, it's honest and it's true. And what else can I do? This work is just the way I relate to the world and the way I deal with the world, and it's like, this is me. I am in the River Arts District in Asheville at Warehouse Studios, which is 170 Lyman Street, right next to the tracks. It's the Riverlink building. My website is barbarafisher.com.
An incredible interview, Peter. I really appreciate the simplicity of the entire thing. From her, your questions, I was drawn into it from that simplicity. And I want to say this from her website, and I think it capsulizes what she said, that transforming interior states into a visual language is what drives me as an artist. The work is a visual investigation, a continual inquiry into the way things work, filtered through my eyes, mind, and subconscious. I've never heard an artist put it so succinctly.
Yeah, absolutely right, Bill. You know, that concept goes back as far as Rene Magritte. Magritte was really the most cerebral, in my less than humble opinion, the most cerebral painter for a long, long time. One of the things that he has been given the honor of, he paints with poetry and he writes words with a brush and paint. And that's really very much what Barbara does in a lot of things. Unlike a purely esoteric artist, and we all know many of them, Barbara is very grounded, very down to earth, knows exactly what she's doing, can explain the work. The work has a purpose and a reason and a direction. And I was looking this morning at Tangled Maps, which is one of her works from about a year ago. And I can imagine the comments that she got when she exhibited those. People having no idea what they are, because our ways of looking at things are very different. We look at things without seeing things. We're in such a hurry to see the next thing and the next thing and the next thing that we don't let our eyes relax and we don't let our consciousness subside a little bit and take a moment and look at what's happening and what the artist is doing. Go ahead.
I cannot agree with you more. And I think that's another one of the things, maybe item 4 or 5 on the list of things that social media is doing to destroy America or the world, the culture. We expect everything to be boiled down to 140 characters, and we expect everything to come at us and for us to project in terms of things like this instead of big concepts like this. And she was very succinct in that. And the other thing that really came at me was her request or demand almost that you be a craftsman, that you know how to do what you're doing and not just throw paint on the screen, on the canvas or the acetate or the wood or whatever medium you're working in, but you know how to build color. And like she said, have colors talking to each other, shaking hands. I was floored. I was completely enthralled in her conversation.
Yeah, Bill. And again, you know, process becomes part of the narrative. The process is integral in the finished product. You know, back in the 60s and 70s, when performance art first really reached, not the mainstream, but reached the media, people wondered what's the difference between performance art and theater. And the difference was quite simple. Performance art emphasized the process as part of its lengthy narrative, whereas in theater, you only saw the finished product. The same thing we're looking for now. When we deconstruct art, we're looking at what are the elements that go to create the narrative. Where are the elements of the storyline? And I think Barbara really understands that quite well. And if you look closely at her paintings, I think you'll get an inkling of where she's trying to go.
You know, it's amazing the corresponding things that she was talking about. We're both writers. There's so much common ground between building something on a canvas or on a medium and for us to build character and development and a conversation on a page so that people could read it and understand. And they may not get all the metaphor or the imagery or the allegory, but if we're not communicating with them at some level, linearly or however it's done, there is communication happening if no communication is going on. I think she voiced the same kind of thing to draw somebody in, to get them involved, even in her abstract work. It's not a beautiful portrait, it's abstract, but you're allowed to think and to put your own comment in there, but her ability to force that out of you is what the artist does.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. And as an artist, what you're always trying to do, whether you're a poet or a painter or a photographer or a sculptor, a dancer, a musician, you're telling a story. And the idea of a story is you're creating a life world for the audience, be viewer, whatever, to come into and learn through. In our case, both of us are script writers to some extent, and we're trying to people our story with creative characters to show people the emotion and so forth and so on that's going on. But it starts with a story. You may not know the end or even the middle of the story, but you have an idea for the middle. And that's the challenge of the artist. That's why, as Barbara said, it takes years and years to refine yourself. And that's really what it is. It's taking the veils away and allowing the creativity to flow with a courage and with a comfort as well.
Yeah, I literally laughed out loud when she talked about approaching a blank canvas and starting, and not sure where it's going to end up. And that's just what you said. Sometimes we'll start a story because we want to tell something or illustrate something. But sometimes, many times, at least I have, started a piece of fiction and not know where it's going. And sometimes in the middle of it, you think you're going to go down Avenue A, and you end up, at a dead end on Avenue C. The story is told,
right?
And you had no idea that's where it was going to go when you started.
Yeah, absolutely. Or for me, and this happens most often for me in my creative writing, you think you're going down Avenue A, and actually the paper's getting tossed in the wastebasket. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Feeling secure enough to know this isn't what I wanted it to be. Let me start again. It's difficult and hard, but I mean, nothing is easy that's worth anything.
I love Barbara Fisher. Thank you for finding her, bringing her into us, and letting her talk to us, her art, and most of all, her brain, her intelligence. I look forward to talking to her again sometime. Hope she can find the time to share with us. Until the next time we're together, take care of each other and respect each other.
And Barbara, for me, thank you so much for your time, for your graciously allowing me into your studio. I really appreciate it. Your work is wonderful. We will put up at the end where everyone can reach you and contact you either for a visit in your studio or your website or whatever. But if you're listening to this, you really need to see these paintings. They're beautiful. Anyway, thanks everyone for your time. Peace.
You can get this podcast. You can tell someone else about this podcast. It's available through YouTube, through iTunes, and through Google Play. Let's hear from you. Let us know what you think so that we can be in community with you. And there is a way to contact us. That's at peter@agnituslife.com or bill@agnituslife.com. That's our email addresses. Let's hear from you. Let's open up the forum.